So good afternoon and namaste, everyone. We're starting the event now. I'm Deep Jongrana. On behalf of the UKaid Skills for Employment Program and Vision and Value Overseas, I would like to welcome all our guests to an exciting session on post-pandemic recovery, the importance of Nepali migrants, skilling, and ethical recruitment. This event also serves as SEEP's EOI launch with special focus on the migration sector. So without further ado, I would like to hand over to the team leader of UKaid Skills for Employment Program, Mr. Baljit Bora. Baljit.
Good. Okay, great. Good afternoon. Deep, if you could maybe put the presentation on the screen, or I can take control.
You can take control.
Okay. It says disable screen sharing.
Should be good.
There you go. Okay, I got it. Okay, well, great. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to first begin by acknowledging the presence of the Honorable Ambassador of the UAE to Nepal, who is here with us this afternoon. Many thanks, Honorable Ambassador, for being here, and it's indeed a pleasure and a privilege to have you amongst us. Along with our ambassador, we also have an esteemed panel of several well-known and prominent leaders, corporate leaders in the Middle East, as well as in Nepal, that are really driving the move towards skilling and ethical recruitment for Nepalese who are working overseas, primarily in what we call the GCC countries that we are focusing on during our conversation this afternoon. And also I'd like to personally thank each one of you who has given your time to participate in this interesting event. So allow me to get started and give you a little bit of background about why we are doing this event and who we are. So just by way of a quick background, we are a program that is being funded by DFID, by the FCDO, which is the British Embassy. It's a program that basically is moving towards providing the basis for effectively skilling and placing in gainful employment for Nepalese who are not only just working domestically, but also working abroad. So we have two areas that we work in. One is in the domestic market, where we are focusing our energy on some key promising sectors of the Nepalese economy that are deemed as being transformational for the next 5 years. And these sectors comprise light manufacturing, commercial agriculture, tourism, construction, and ICT. This is our emphasis. And then at the same time, we are also working, given the fact that a large number of Nepalese do migrate abroad, our focus also is on making sure that we do upskill the Nepalese workforce that is going abroad and pursuing gainful economic and employment opportunities. So upskilling migrants is one of our key focus. Along with that, we are also working to find ways in which we can reduce the cost of migration for Nepalese that are going abroad. And then at the same time, those Nepalese that are remitting money back to their home country here in Nepal, we are also ensuring that they find ways to use their savings to deploy them into productive investments. And then finally, also working towards reducing the cost of remittance for a number of Nepalese workers that are going abroad to make a gainful living. So the goal is really to skill and place Nepalese, but then at the same time, our approach is extremely innovative in the sense that it's a market-led solution program wherein we work extensively with the private sector through a collaborative effort, working and the support of the government, the federal government and the provincial governments. But the whole model under which we operate is a co-investment model where we seek solutions jointly working with the enterprise sector or the private sector to figure out ways in which we can skill Nepalese workers into gainful employment opportunities that can be made use of when these employees either work in the domestic economy or they work abroad. So a co-investment from a project model, it's an inclusive in the sense that we encourage the participation of women and disadvantaged groups, which is the key focus of this program. But then at the same time, we are also working and deploying very innovative skilling models across the country. We have as a partner, the government of Nepal. Within the government of Nepal, Ministry of Labor, Employment and Social Security is our key counterpart through whom we work. And then, of course, we have very extensive relationships with 2 provincial governments where the focus on migration is the most, because these 2 provinces, province number 5, which is now called Lumbini, and province number 2 represent the largest outward number of migrant population that's going out to seek gainful employment opportunities abroad. And these economies also represent the underlying sectors, which basically are the fodder or are the basically staple of the Nepalese economy, whether it's light manufacturing, tourism, commercial agriculture, or construction. These are the two most prominent provinces in the context of the economic pattern that we see in Nepal. Now, in terms of the socioeconomic context, the reason why we are talking today is because if you look at the numbers of migrant workers that are migrating abroad, because that's the essence of our discussion, since 2008, over 4 million work permits have been issued by the government for Nepalese workers to go abroad. About 91.5% are people that are male, and these are 88% are being hired and being placed to recruitment agencies across the country, from the country. Female migrants are about less than 10%. The unemployment rate is about 11.4%. One of the reasons behind why this program makes a lot of sense in today's context is this big concern that over 75% of the Nepalese that go abroad are unskilled. And this is where we believe that we need to do a lot more in terms of turning the capacity of these individuals to become semi-skilled and skilled. And as you see from the chart, a lot of them basically have no secondary education, about 85% of folks. Then at the same time, the push factors is what really drives these people to go abroad. Because if you look at the gainful employment and the average monthly income, which is about $135 a month, is basically what is the average income, minimum wage that Nepalese are able to earn. But then when they go abroad to other countries, the propensity to earn more is a lot higher. And this is one primary reason that basically enables people to look for gainful employment outside Nepal. At the same time, the two provinces that present the most in terms of outward migration are these two provinces that we talked about, Province 2 and Province 5, which is now called Lumbini. Collectively, between the two of themselves, they represent the largest concentration of people that are migrating abroad. And that's one of the reasons why we are focused in these two provinces. Now, in terms of the impact of COVID, as we all have probably know, this is one of the reasons why we are a lot more interested and excited about a collaboration with companies in the GCC, is because COVID did have an impact, given the fact that over 30% of the GDP of Nepal depends on remittance income that comes in through these people that are working abroad. It does have an impact on the macroeconomic situation of the country and the overarching balance of payments. So the expected number of returnees that came back after the COVID-19 situation is over 500,000 people that have returned. It's only in the last 3 to 4 to 5 months that we are starting to see an upward trend in the context of new migrant permits, labor permits being issued, and also migrant workers looking at ways in which they can start to get redeployed back to their destination countries where they came from. So, and the reasons behind why they really want to migrate is the sense that the employment opportunities are still limited in the country, though the government is doing a lot now in the context of creating that economic space and helping transformational growth occur across the sectors of prominence that I talked about. But despite the fact, we still cannot stop migration, because it is a good, this is a necessary good that the country really needs in the context of not only helping the country to reach even in terms of its balance of payments and have a good macroeconomic situation, but also allow the Nepalese to seek gainful employment and be a productive workforce abroad as well. So overarchingly, I think the trends do look positive for the Nepalese workforce, even if it were to go abroad. I mean, things are starting to recover in the GCC, as we are seeing. Non-oil sector growth also is on the increase. UAE is going to show some good promise. I mean, of course, there's World Bank is predicting about, IMF is predicting about a 1% growth in GDP this coming year, but of course, get to about 2.2% in 2022. Similarly, other countries in the region, whether it's Saudi Arabia, Oman, Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, are also beginning to show some level of promise. And also, one of the very healthy signs, and of course, I want to thank the ambassador and his country, the UAE. Vaccination has started in a big way in the UAE, and it is available not only to nationals, but everybody that basically is in the UAE, and I'm sure the ambassador will speak about that. That also is a very positive sign. Major infrastructure projects are being fast-tracked. Also, the labor market regulation is likely to increase productivity initiatives. The new thinking that is emerging globally, of which UAE is a very integral part of the global discussion on global migration, there is a shift away from demand for unskilled labor to skilled labor. So this is the trend, and G2G agreements between governments is starting to become a fact, and it's becoming all the more prominent. We're also seeing the emergence of mega recruitment agencies now in the Gulf, especially in countries like Saudi Arabia and even in the UAE. That will make it a lot more easier now for governments to implement regulations and related to minimum skills that they would like to see before they deploy people and bring people into their country. We are also seeing new corridors that are developing for Nepali workers beyond the GCC. There's Japan, Israel, Portugal, Poland, Germany, and Italy. This is just to give you a little sense. I mean, I'm not going to go much into it, but this just gives you a sense in the context of why is it that remittance is so important for Nepal, that I cited to you. About over 31% of remittance income is a contribution to GDP compared to other countries of the region. Of course, the total value of remittance is about close to about 9 billion that Nepal receives. And of course, this chart does give you a sense in terms of where the Nepalese workers really go, which countries do they really work in. And the two provinces that I talked to you about, Province 5 and Province 2, collectively contribute towards close to about 40% or 41% of the total migration that takes place from Nepal. Unfortunately, this is the sad story that we see. The profile of the migrant worker that's going abroad is somebody who's is either low, no education, middle education, and high education. So you look at the profile, 2/3 of the Nepalese are unskilled. And this is a trend that we have been seeing across the years, and the government of Nepal does a pretty good way to track the data that's emerging in the last 1 or 2 years. And of course, the cost of migration associated right below in the screen for migrants to migrate to these countries is high, is high when you look at what these individuals really earn by way of a living. So it's very high. Now, the reason why we are so interested in this whole space is the fact that there are several challenges that we see for Nepalese workers that are going abroad. One is the monopoly of the recruitment agencies in the country. This is something that I think the government realizes it, and all of us realize it is something that needs to be corrected, and ways have to be found. Because this does increase the cost of migration, because illegal, unjustified costs range between 66 to 78% of total costs of migration before loan servicing. Because a lot of these individuals that go abroad basically take on loans from either informal money lenders or the loan sharks, as you call them, and it becomes a lot more expensive for them over and above what they pay to go abroad. Of course, the net income, is also an issue that we look at, because migration financing is something that they go after. It's about 35%. The principal per interest about 27% total expected revenue. The skills mismatch opportunity cost is about 36%. And the cost of remitting is also higher at about 5.5% of the amount that is remitted. So it does basically hurt the net income of the migrant that goes abroad. So this is another area that is of great interest to us, because excessive loans at non-market rates, excessive fees that these migrant workers pay, and then less disposable income for savings. And this is another problem because of lack of good investment opportunities. A lot of the migrant workers, about over 78%, goes into daily consumption. So the migrant worker that spends money back into Nepal, 78% of the money goes into daily consumption, is not being used for productive investments. So these are the 4 areas, the 4 challenges that we see as a project and as the government of Nepal working with the British Embassy, trying to figure out what is it that we can do with all our partners. Now, this is something by way of a sad story, because the cost of migration on an average, it's about, this is a more conservative figure, and it does not include the loans that the individual takes on. And this just gives you documents, all the costs that a migrant worker has to pay to be able to go abroad. So total is about close to about, I would say $1,000, but even goes to as high as $1,500 for migration. And we've been able to do through our research, we've been able to find that there are certain costs that the migrants should not be paying. There are certain costs that should be paid by the employer, especially when it comes to attestation by embassies, the airport taxes, the visa expenses, the air tickets. So those are the kinds of things that we believe in some, and then there are a lot of good companies, I have to say, abroad that are practicing what we call ethical recruitment and are taking a lot of these costs on. But we have seen a preponderance of a lot of companies and recruitment agents that are really siphoning a lot of money out of these migrant workers. So this is where we really need to correct the situation in terms of the total cost that migrant workers pay. Now, also at the same time, we also believe that with a little bit of skilling, we could really turn the propensity of a migrant worker to basically earn more than 35% of their income if they were to be skilled. An unskilled worker on average would probably earn about $219 a month, but if he were to be skilled or a semi-skilled, he would probably see his income rise to about $321 a month. And we have seen this based on our experience having worked with and also consulted with a lot of companies that hire people, whether it's in Malaysia, Saudi Arabia, and elsewhere, where we have seen this difference. And this is why I think it is so critical for us to intervene. So as a project, our main focus is on TA and challenge funding, and through technical assistance and through what we call challenge fund, because as I mentioned before, we do co-investments. We co-invest in basically helping come up with ideas in which we can correct these market constraints. We can address these challenges. And these challenges relate more around excessive fees that recruitment agencies pay. So how can we really encourage ethical recruitment? How can we work with companies that will help in minimizing the costs? There is information failure. A lot of the migrant workers don't even know what jobs they're getting into and where they're going as far as the jobs are concerned. It's only when they get to the airport and getting on planes is when they really know as to what the opportunity is and where they are off to. So there are ways in which we can correct this information and provide for the information that's required. And of course, at the same time, we're also intervening quite a bit in terms of making available affordable loans to migrant workers that are thinking of going abroad. So if there is a way for us to work together with like-minded companies that can also help us promote the basis for these migrant workers to be able to go through formal financial institutions and be able to get access to capital or funding that they need to be able to make their migration a lot more cheaper. Hopefully, if ethical recruitment does take place, then the cost of migration for the migrant would be a lot lesser based on the earlier slide that I showed you. So these are the kinds of things that we really want to address through the way we work. So I'm also very happy to note that these kinds of issues are not new to either to the UAE or to Saudi Arabia or Qatar or to the government of Nepal. I have to commend the government of the UAE and the Honorable Ambassador that they have already worked this thing out with the government of Nepal to put together a memorandum of understanding that they basically is starting to address these issues and is speaking to these issues so that there is that basis for fair recruitment, ethical recruitment for people that are going abroad. So I'm sure the ambassador will talk a little bit about this as well, but this is a good sign where MOUs and government-to-government agreements are now taking shape in the context of helping promote fair and ethical migrant workforce. So in terms of our program, why is it that we are interested? So as I mentioned to you, the areas that I outlined to you in terms of working with ethical recruitment companies, reducing cost of migration, helping expedite the skilling initiatives with our partners. We have an initiative that the British government has basically made possible through our project that's being run by us, wherein in addition to technical assistance, we are also providing what is called challenge funding. Challenge funding is basically a co-investment that we are making, wherein we are trying to align your business interests with ours and with the ones and the personal interests of the individuals that are trying to seek gainful employment, get skilled and go abroad. So if there are ways and means in which you would like to come forward and put together a value proposition that allows for skilling to take place either domestically within the Nepalese market, where the infrastructure required for putting a skilling infrastructure in place would require some co-investment, and you're by yourself as an employer may not want to be able to do that because the returns might be a lot more longer in terms of the gestation period that's involved. That's where we can come in through our challenge fund process to co-invest with you in innovative solutions that can help address these challenges that I outlined to you all. So the challenge fund basically works in a way where we have a two-step process. When an application is put in by an employer, which is basically an expression of interest, and if we like the concept, and if this concept addresses some of the key principles that are laid out on the slide with regards to a model that you're putting forward is going to be scalable, sustainable, it is innovative in the sense that is addressing these market constraints that we talked about, is helping alleviate the challenges that we face, then we basically take this in EOI into a full application stage. And then we work with you towards putting together a pilot project. And then if the pilot project does work, then it goes into a scale up. So I'll have my colleague Stuti talk a little bit more about this as we go along. But just to give it a little sense, in the year that we've been around in the context of implementing this program, we have now formed close to about 16 partnerships with like-minded employers like you who are interested in addressing these issues around migration and on skills development. So we do have a £9 million challenge fund, but then at the same time, we have invested close to about 3 million of our challenge funding now, along with 3 million that has been put in by our private sector partners. But the overall leverage that we seek to achieve through this initial set of investments that we made is close to about £12 million. So it does show you that the ability for us to leverage the British taxpayers' pound, £1, basically helping us leverage close to 12 pounds of private sector investment that is leading to basically create the value added that we need to create going forward. We've had similar experiences working in Nepal through our financial inclusion programs that were also funded by the British government, where through a £13.5 million program that we invested through our challenge fund, we were able to leverage close to over 300 million worth of private sector funding coming from within Nepal and international partners like you all that were interested in helping enhance the goals of financial inclusion in the country. So this is a proven model that works, and it also allows for us to basically figure out a way where we can co-invest with you. I'm going to very quickly just give 2 examples or 3 examples, and I'm going to close my presentation. Just to give you one example of how we really work. So here is an example of a British company called JCB. As you all probably know, JCB is all over the UAE as well. JCB is involved in heavy equipment. So we have been able to work with JCB's local partner called Murang Auto Works to convince JCB to come into the country and create skilling academies. So they have basically brought in the entire curriculum. They brought in the entire certification. That is a JCB certification that is basically enables for these individuals to be trained in state-of-the-art curriculum that basically has been brought in, tested and tried across the border in India, where JCB has a lot of skilling academies. These skilling academies have not been set up in Kathmandu, but they have been set up in rural areas, wherein we have co-invested 50% of the total investment that's required to set up these academies with regards to bringing in the equipment that is required for skilling, for training, the retrofitting of the skilling facility, but then at the same time also bringing in the basis for multi-terrain tracking capability that is required for training, and then also simulators for the first time that are being brought into Nepal for the purposes of helping skill in different terrains. As you know, Nepal is a highly hilly country and it has all types of terrains. So we basically made this thing possible. So it's JCB branded certification, which is also recognized in the Middle East. Multi-terrain tracking capability and a monthly earning potential can go up from anywhere from $250 in Nepal to as high as $1,300 for the same heavy equipment operator if he were to come abroad. And given that construction boom is still starting to, is beginning and continuing in the Middle East and the Gulf, we believe that we are effectively positioning a lot of our Nepali workers to take on this skill profession and also be gainfully employed abroad. Here's another area where it's not just about construction or just about agribusiness. Others. There's a lot of sophistication in the Nepali workforce that you will be surprised to hear. We are also enabling through programs that we are now collaborating with Amazon Web Solutions. As you all know, AWS runs a very interesting program called AWS UKaid, and of course with Microsoft, where we are introducing for the first time programs on cloud computing and artificial intelligence, working with programs, not only these two, but also through a company called Fuse Machines out of the US. And these companies have brought in their state-of-the-art training curriculum, which is now being onboarded not only with colleges, but also with schools, with a view towards training Nepalese on the jobs of tomorrow. The future jobs in ICT are in cloud computing and in artificial intelligence. But then at the same time, also, we are basically laying fiber optics all across the country. There's a company called WorldLink that is bringing an Indonesian partner to help create the basis for a skilling academy that can be put in place to help train people on fiber optics. And that's another area that we're working on. And this skill is transferable, not only just in Nepal, but once people are trained and certified, working with the likes of an AWS UKaid program that also has a basis to also gainfully employ people through their onboarding platforms that each of these institutions have in the area of cloud computing. Finally, an initiative that we thought is very interesting that I'm going to ask Tuti also to delve a little bit more on is an initiative that we've just introduced, is with a company called Vision and Values in Nepal. This is the first company in Nepal that is practicing ethical recruitment. It has engaged itself with several employers in the Middle East that you see on the right-hand side of the screen. These are employees that are really interested in fair recruitment, ethical recruitment, are also willing to pay for the cost, a large part of the cost of that is associated with what the migrant worker has to pay in terms of ensuring that the migrant worker does get skilled and is job ready by the time he arrives on site. So Vision and Values is through a strategic alliance with City and Guilds that is in formation, that is just about forming away through City and Guilds training and skilling that will take place in Nepal. So the Skilling Academy is going to be set up by City and Guilds and Vision Values in Nepal with the purposes of City and Guilds providing the attestation and certification, but the skilling being done by Vision and Values. And then in emerging job profiles and job occupations that are in demand by these employers in the Middle East that we have worked with. And therefore, the initial basis for getting them skilled and trained and be job ready is happening in Nepal. And then these people are then being deployed and brought over to the Middle East. So what that really does, it helps enhance the skill set. It helps increase income by increase that we want to see through our program. It helps increase in the savings. It also helps provide for better and certified skills. So these are the kinds of ideas that we want to basically see emerging through a partnership that we want to form under the Skills for Employment program. I'm going to stop here now, and I will now would like to take this opportunity to set the stage for a lot of our discussion that will follow. But before we start off and begin a discussion and start to think about how some of these things that I've talked about do have relevance to what our employers in the Middle East are doing, and also what's happening in Nepal, I'd like to take this opportunity of first introducing the Honorable Ambassador, who is going to provide his opening remarks. Honorable Ambassador, Mr. Naqvi is the UAE Ambassador in Nepal. He has been I would say, a tireless advocate of bilateral relationships between the two countries. He's been in the country for 4 years, and individually also has basically done a lot in the context of ensuring the Nepalese government that what he and his country believes in the context of figuring out ways in which the best means and opportunities could be found for Nepalese workers. And UAE is probably a shining example in the Middle East in the context of the diversity of nationalities that constitute its labor force. So we're really proud and really very happy, His Excellency, to have you before us and give your opening remarks. Over to you, His Excellency, for your opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Bahra. Really, I'm so happy to be with you, and really you give us very nice information regarding the migrants and special workers in different way, how to improve this business. I would like to thanks to the British Embassy and it is also United Kingdom Aid Skills for Employment programs for organizing these virtual events and giving me this opportunity to share my idea on the importance of the Nepali migrants, skilling and ethical recruitment. And also my thanks to Vision and Values for their association with the UKaid Skills. For the employment program, it is interesting that I am speaking at this event at the same time that my country's UAE is hosting the 13th Summit of the Global Forum on Migration and Development. Over 1,700 senior officials from over 100 countries, including host countries' government, the United Nations, World Bank, OECD, European Union, and FCDO have registered to participate in this 7 days online events. As we know, that United Arab Emirates is also known as international business hub. Largest number of international companies has been established and contribute to the livelihoods of millions of people that have pursued employment and bring entrepreneurial opportunities in the United Arab Emirates. We host a largest number of migrants workers, about 8 million from all the world, and around 200,000 or more from Nepal. They are working in different sectors, in oil sectors, in civil aviation, in hotels, and everywhere now. I think there's good opportunities to Nepal to get many opportunities in UAE. But they're focusing on migrants, especially and skills. But I think most of the infrastructure in the Middle East are complete, and we are focusing on specialist people who are doctors, engineers, or semi-skilled migrants. I think there's many of opportunities to them. The government of United Arab Emirates and Nepal and the firms and the people of our two countries have had long-standing productive relationship. I am proud of the hope proud and hope to continue strengthening this relation. We have also firmed a bilateral agreement between our two countries to promote safe migrations, as well as help support the advancement of Nepali migration workers. In 2019, both government received our labor agreement in order to make it more ethical and beneficial for Nepali workers. We hope to be focusing on both sides. I mean, ladies and both the gender. I mean, we saw, especially in the airport, sometimes not allowing, especially for ladies, to work in outside of countries. I hope to be government here opening for women, especially to work in different way, in different sectors in United Arab Emirates. And specialists, we have, I mean, too much demand and assistant workers, especially as housemaid and babysitter in different families. They like to receive, especially for Nepal. But when ladies going to the airport, not allow them to go there, and this, I think this is a problem to be other ladies to go and by the other way. I mean, especially by the other countries. That means human trafficking is, I mean, this side. We hope to be opening for special Nepali to opening for the ladies legally, and they have the airport. I think when we go to our countries in the legally way. We're focusing in the pandemic when the biggest problem, especially illegal workers in United Arab Emirates. They are suffering. They are, I mean, they are contact with them. I think it will be, we should focusing on how to be guide them to the legal way. And especially they are also what you said, Excellency, regarding the, they get, most of the workers giving money for the companies or some, I mean, supporter to give these opportunities, and they lose this money. I mean, we hope to be, I think your company, when you're giving them good skills, they can go in legal way. This is my point, Excellency. We hope to be UAE as largest countries in the Middle East. We are welcoming the high skill in my countries. And I hope to be also implementation of the second specialists in our agreement between Nepal and UAE in labor sectors, focusing on women's to be allow them to go directly, legally, legal way. But still, this agreement is still not approved from the government. I have to be approved as soon as possible. My speech, it is long, but I hope to be focusing on these issues, and I hope to be getting other opportunity to go. Maybe I will share my other view. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Excellent. Thank you so much for your background, and I'll make sure that we share your presentation with everybody, Honorable Ambassador. We'll also be putting it up on our website. But Honorable Ambassador, you did mention one thing that I thought was very interesting, is the active role that the UAE is playing in the Global Forum on Migration Development. We are very aware of this. In fact, I was chatting with a lot of my colleagues here in the UAE. In fact, I think His Highness, I think, has taken a lot of interest in this. And UAE has taken over the chairmanship of the Global Forum from Ecuador and is running this.
Yes.
So it shows the commitment, Ambassador, which is amazing. And, you know, in terms of you are part of the global discussion, the global dialogue in terms of where migration needs to be go and how it should be managed. That's excellent.
It is hosted by our Vice President, Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, as well as his Prime Minister, as he's also leader of Dubai, and all my government aware about this, and especially from highest level under government level. We are working together to be enhance this sector to be legally, and we need to also our friends from different countries join our people to be as a friend and as same like our citizen in United Arab Emirates. No difference in the colors or religions or any kind of ethnics. We are welcoming everybody in UAE. As I hope to be what I saw here in Nepal, one of the best countries, especially as a harmony of people living together. And I hope to be UAE also my countries. It is also one of the happiness countries and happiness worker there also.
Thank you, His Excellency. Thank you so much. His Excellency Valami, I'm going to move on to now to the interesting part where I think a lot of what you've said in terms of your reflections and the introduction that I set out will hopefully bring to bear in this panel. We have assembled a very good panel, His Excellency and our British Ambassador and Embassy folks. So I will basically, what I'll do is I'm going to start by introducing our individual panelists and in terms of start a good discussion. I mean, the idea is to have a good and healthy interaction about the future of Nepali migration, especially in the Middle East. I'm also going to encourage all the people that are listening and are participating in this forum. There's a chat box on to your right. And if you would like to ask any questions as the panel discussion is going, we will take the time and take a pause during our discussion to take on your questions as well. So please feel free to put those questions on the chat box next to the screen. I'd like to first start by introducing the first member on our panel. And what I'll do is I'll first introduce each one of the members and I'll ask them to provide some introduction background. I'll go one by one and then I'll come back and start a conversation. I want to first start with David Stockton, who's the CEO of Dulsco. David, thanks very much for joining us. David has over 30 years of experience holding leadership positions in multinational organizations across the world, and of course in all different types of industries, whether it's aviation or facility management, or even including manpower. He is the CEO and Managing Director of UAE's longest serving people and environmental solutions business. And I was really amazed by, David will tell us a little bit about the humble origins and beginnings of the company. An 85-year-old Emirati organization owned by the Emiratis, 85-year-old, and how it really started, and now has a strong workforce of over 12,000 people that work across their different service lines and industries. So David is very passionate about the synergy among employees, customers, and the community. So he is going to talk a lot more about how he sees and perceives this whole discussion about not only just skilling and recruitment, but also in terms of what we do with fair recruitment. So David, let me start off by asking you, David, could you give us a little bit of background about Dulsco and a little bit about your vision as a company and in terms of your growth plans for the next 2-3 years, and where does development of manpower, workforce development fit into your overarching vision as a company? Over to you, David.
Thank you, and Your Excellency, thank you very much for your introduction speech as well. Dulsco began its history 1935 on the banks of the creek, and it started with its founder literally out walking with one of his friends. And back in the day, the dhows were on very short anchor, and they noticed a dhow needed unloading, so they began helping the dhow captain unloading the dhow. And a stevedoring business was born out of multiple dhows, Dubai being a trading port back in the day. And its business continued rapidly with the advent of a manpower business. Dulsco's actual name is an acronym for what was then Dubai Labour Supply Company, so DU, LA, and then obviously Dulsco as in SO Supply Company. So an interesting beginning. As you said, we're over 12,500 people in the UAE. We also have about 2,300 people in Qatar. Our business is split really three ways of being a human capital business, both in long-term legacy customers in the people business, as well as about a 22-year-old environmental business, which has really moved away from just waste transportation to the treatment, the repurposing and the reprocessing now of waste, as well as our white collar business, which is permanent placement and outsourcing. And obviously a business like ours is highly dependent on a skilled, an unskilled and a semi-skilled workforce. So everything that we can do to bring in and raise the bar of people's skills is what we want to do. Naturally, with all of our businesses on this panel, there is a natural churn every year, and replacing that skill is obviously a time and commercial challenge. And the more we can do within country, the better, because it speeds up the process ultimately for all of our customers.
Thank you, David. Thanks very much for the introduction. Before I move on to the next panelists and have them introduce themselves, I also want to acknowledge the presence of Lisa, who's joined us. Lisa is the head of development at the British Embassy. Lisa, good afternoon to you, or good morning. It's really a great honor to have you, Lisa.
I have one.
It's good morning from me.
Good morning, Lisa. Good morning. Yes, Honorable Ambassador. Oh, sorry. Oh, he just took a brief. Did you have anything to? Oh,
sorry. My colleague who replaced me just a few minutes. He will be here.
Sure,
Mr.
Ambassador.
Ibrahim is also the.
Sure.
Counselor here.
Thank you. So we will now move on to I'm going to introduce our next member on our panel. I'm going to introduce Joe Fernando, who's a regional HR director with Sodexo. Sodexo, everybody knows, I mean, Joe has extensive experience in the facility services industry. Joe specializes in human resources management and also performance management, employee management, recruiting. He's worked for over 20 years, and his current role at Sodexo Catering and Facility Management is in the position of a regional HR director. Prior to his current involvement, he led the HR function for Sodexo in Kuwait, Iraq, and Oman. He's also been instrumental in helping set up a lot of these flagship properties that the Jumeirah Group has in the UAE. Of course, the Burj Al Arab, the Emirates Tower, and the Medina Jumeirah. So, Joseph, Sodexo, tell us a little bit about Sodexo and the origins of Sodexo and the importance that Sodexo plays in the economy in the Gulf and abroad, and how do you see workforce development? Joseph, you're on mute.
Is it audible now?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Baljit, for this opportunity, and His Excellency and the panelists and the participant. Good afternoon, good morning. Just to talk about Sodexo. Sodexo started as a small family-owned company in southern part of France, in Marseille, and started with the ship chandling operation services. And it's grown up very drastically. And today we are about 420,000 people across the globe and serving 100 million consumers every day. And particularly Middle East, we are about 10,000 people and into quality of service given to our customer and clients. And what is that meaning? And what we do, and predominantly in the globe, we have 3 divisions, which is called on-site services and benefit and rewards and personal and home services. We belong to on-site services. What do we do in on-site services? Basically food solutions and the facility management, which includes soft and hard. So this particularly in Middle East, Sodexo presence there about 30 years. And as we said that, and we strongly growing in this part of the world. We have a clear growth strategy, global strategy, and particularly in Middle East and UAE. So so we have to support that, and the management focus on the principle where we get the right people to grow and in this part of the world. And as I said, Sodexo is a very globally responsible company, as you know it. We have got a lot of medals and awards for that. And also we have joined charter both in ILO to fight for the fundamental rights of people across the globe. And we are very strong with our values of service spirit, team spirit, and spirit of progress, combined with our ethical principles. Okay, so when you talk about ethical recruitment, all comes in part of the world. Just to say that in Sodexo, particularly having ethical and compliance in team globally governing the entire region. So this topic enough for us, and which might be support for us in our efforts, what will we do to bring the right people to our organization and around the globe, and particularly in Middle East.
Thank you, Joseph. Thanks very much. And notwithstanding the fact, an interesting statistic for a lot of people is that I understand from Joseph that Sodexo feeds close to about 1.8 billion people every day in the Middle East. Is that correct, Joseph, or is the number higher than 1.8 million?
No, we said that globally 100 million consumers every day.
No, how many people do you feed in the Middle East, in Dubai, in the UAE, every day? A million people every day that you feed. Good. Okay, so we're now going to move on to, I'm going to ask Tony. Tony, who's a regional manager for Middle East, North Africa, and Europe for City and Guilds. Tony, thanks very much for joining us. Tony has been based in Dubai. He's responsible for over 300 vocational centers, certifying approximately 25,000 people every year. And Tony has been working in the Middle East for over 25 years now, supporting government and employers to engage in effective skilling initiatives that make a positive difference to people's lives and aspirations. So I'm going to ask Tony to talk a little bit about City and Guilds in the Middle East and North Africa and the portfolio that you oversee. Your a little bit of background about yourself, about City and Guilds, and if you could tell us a little bit about that, it would be great, Tony.
Thank you. And so it's wonderful to be here. So it's great to hear His Excellency talk about the wonderful things that the UAE are focused on for migrant workers, and also the panelists' contribution to that. So City and Guilds plays a part to a certain extent where we can. So let me give you a little background about City and Guilds. So the City and Guilds of London Institute was founded 140 years ago by the Corporation of the City of London and 16 livery companies, which are called the Guilds, to really protect and promote the standard of technical education. The organisation is a Royal Chartered Institute and registered charity, and we have retained our link with the UK Royal Family since 1881. And today, the president of the Institute is Her Royal Highness, the Princess Royal. The Institute is the awarding body for City and Guilds and ILM qualifications, and it also is the founding organisation for the City and Guilds Group, which I'll talk a little bit about later. All those businesses within the group are focused around various stages of the skills journey. So let's go back to City and Guilds, with the core business is its qualifications, assessment and accreditation. And we work with training centres of all types, both as well as with employers and governments across about 80 countries, including Nepal. We work with over 10,000 centres and support over 3 million learners each year to develop their skills in a wide range of sectors, such as hospitality and catering, construction, engineering, oil and gas, business, manufacturing, automotive, IT, etc. I think it's 25 industries that we engage with. But I think what really sets us apart from similar organisations is our strong sense of purpose, which informs every decision we make. Our purpose today remains the same as it always has, to enable people and organisations to develop their skills for personal and economic growth. I think the way I like to talk about our purpose is quite simple. We're all about skills and jobs, and we exist to help people get into their first job, progress on the job, and move on to the next one. So we have a number of companies within the group. One is called Kineo. It develops in-house training programs for businesses, helping people progress within organisations and develop specific skills for their job development. We've got ILM and the Oxford Group, which both focus on leadership and management skills, from higher level and degree level leadership apprenticeships through to CEO training and mentoring. And we've also got a very exciting new business called Digital Me. It's in digital credentialing, and it uses digital badges to recognize people's skills and talents, which I think is going to be a very positive disruptor in how people's competence is actually recognized, and could play a critical part actually in the governance for migrant recruitment. Our presence in the Middle East goes back about 50 years. We've been here in Dubai informally for about 2008, and our main operations are vocational consultancy for national development, leadership and management, engineering, and supporting the service sector. I'm looking forward to hearing more about what we can do.
Thank you, Tony. Thanks very much, and great to have you. And I'm sure we're going to explore some synergy here as we go along. There's already one in the making, as I described earlier. Simon. Simon, as some of you or most of you all know, has 30 years of experience, including acting as the Chief Operating Officer of the US $7 billion Expo 2020 in Dubai, and the 2015 inaugural US $1 billion in European Games in Baku, and also serving for 12 years as the Chief Executive of the British Olympic Association years ago. And then at the same time, also a board member of the subsequent bid and organizing the LOCOG committee, and also one of 3 British signatories on the host city contract when London was awarded the event. Simon, it's great to have you. I'm really curious, Simon. Why is it that you have taken on despite the C-suite positions that you've enjoyed all your life and being based here in the Middle East and doing a lot of interesting work with the large corporates, what attracted you to Vision and Values, and why? What are you doing with Vision and Values? And what do you see in Vision and Values and an initiative that we are trying to achieve? I'd like to hear a lot from you, Simon.
Well, thanks, Baljit. Thanks for that introduction, and I'm delighted to contribute to today's debates. About 18 months ago, I was approached by Padam Pudel, the founder of Vision and Value, an existing recruitment company based in Kathmandu, providing migrant workforce into the Middle East. And Padam articulated to me his vision for what the necessary transformation that his business was going to have to go through. Because through the experience that he had of working with employers in the Middle East, he realized that there was a significant change that was taking place and that was needed to take place. So it was taking place within the minds of the employers, but needed to take place within the structure back in Nepal. I had the opportunity of going to Nepal, and I found an industry that was absolutely in need for significant transformation. The current situation of recruitment out of Nepal is not optimum. It's not optimum either for the employer or indeed for the migrant workers, and change was necessary. And this was entirely consistent with my experience and the leadership that I was able to deliver through running Expo 2020, where we ran very much on an ethical recruitment basis, and that we gave a lot of attention to workers' welfare. I think the whole, there is a significant change taking place in terms of the need for employers to take a much more responsible approach to how they deal with their migrant workers, from recruitment all the way through until servicing and managing those individuals once they are in country. I have a background many years ago in the British Army, and therefore I've got a natural empathy with Nepal, having had the opportunity of spending some time working with the Nepalese British Gurkhas. And I was asked by Padam to help him transform Vision and Value, but also to expand its service provision. First of all, by creating a training center, a pilot training center in Kathmandu to upskill unskilled workers and to provide them with a vocational training qualification that would give them better long-term career prospects and allow them to send more money back home into Nepal that would obviously help the Nepalese economy. So transforming Vision and Value in terms of what was being needed by employers in the Middle East, Secondly, by creating this training establishment, working with what I believe to be the world's leading vocational training accreditation body, City and Guilds. And then thirdly, working with employers who want to de-risk the employment process and backload more of the training into Nepal that would reduce their costs. And therefore, we will be working with employers on specific programs for employees, migrant workers that are going to go into their specific workforce, delivering programs on behalf of those employers back in Nepal. So that's the background in terms of how I become involved with Vision and Value. And it's all been driven by the founder's vision.
Thank you, Simon. Thanks very much. Suvi, I'm going to ask you to just wait for the next round of questioning, and I want you to come in and talk a little bit about the operating model and vision of SEEP. Before we do that, Suvi, I want to just go back and start the conversation with David, and then I'll ask the others to come in. David, tell me a little bit about the composition of the Nepalese in your workforce, and what really drives you towards looking at Nepal as a destination to recruit workers today and in the next 2 to 3 years. What are the key underlying unique characteristics about Nepal that appeal to you? And what are some of the things that don't appeal to you that you believe need to be corrected as far as the recruitment of Nepal is concerned? We'd like to hear from you, David.
Sure. So the Nepalese workforce amount to about 15% of our workforce today. They are split across what we would call semi-skilled and unskilled. The attractiveness of the workforce, bizarrely, we have a very strong seaport operation, and everybody knows Nepal has got the tallest mountain in the world. And last time I checked, there was no ocean surrounding it. But we seem to have, there seems to be a very high skill level and agility level of the workforce, certainly within our stevedoring and our seaport operations. The other area is within aviation. And within aviation, again, that agility and strength, both of body and mind, I think have allowed a large portion of our workforce, not only in the UAE, but also in Qatar as well, to be a go-to community within aviation. I think the other part of attractiveness of when we're recruiting is that aviation obviously has been an enormous growing sector. You know, it's what, 30% of the GDP of the UAE. So therefore the strength of knowing the longevity of your job and role is an attractiveness, but it has a downside, which I'll come back to in a moment. In terms of the workforce in general, what we've seen is a trusted, honest workforce, slightly community-led. So it seems to be what we would call sort of pack and herd mentality. So it tends to be a group of people that want to work together. So fragmentation and different roles become a challenge, but I think through the education that has helped. Our largest two other recruitment areas are obviously Pakistan and India, but again with different dynamics for different industries, and it's something that we would like to explore further. We would like to recruit a large proportion of females because of some of the customer service roles that we have, both customer facing directly and back of house. And there are some areas which I'll come on to later when we get into this discussion, that we have specific needs for what we call skilled roles. They're skilled because they're in charge of very expensive vehicles and in a high risk area. And of the proportion of people that we have, it is predominantly male. I would like to see that change, and our business would like to see that change. And I would welcome the challenge and the opportunity of upskilling females to be able to operate these vehicles. And I'm talking buses, and in the environmental space, the waste management vehicles, which have a degree of obviously driving skill, but also a degree of customer awareness of where you're operating. And that would be something I'd like to see a great deal more of. Some of the challenges that we face are around the perception of the visa process. And, you know, predominantly because we're an onshore company, we're a 2-year visa cycle where for everybody that's listening, your visa is redone every 2 years through the medical program of the UAE and other markets. And obviously you rejoin, but there seems to be a challenge with people understanding from a workforce point of view that it's not just a 2-year fixed program. And that's what I referred to before in aviation and seaports. This has enormous longevity. We've been operating in Dubai's and the UAE's airports for since the beginning. So we've got that skill level, and therefore that job creation is there. And there will be natural churn. People will move and migrate either back home or to another country. But that doesn't mean just because there's a 2-year stamp in your visa that you will only stay for 2 years. It is obviously as long as you want it to be. And that's something I think we've got to be able to overcome. So there is an enormous attractiveness for people that want to know what they're doing day in, day out, rather than just being a standby labourer to go and help out on X, Y, or Z over a period of time. And I think that's something that needs sorting out. And we put a lot of time and effort into coming to country. So we come to Nepal, we don't rely on an agency. We will come in and work with our RPs, our recruitment partner, and we will present what we are offering. And that is something I would like to see a hell of a lot more, working hand in hand and symbiotic with the ability, to work with the recruitment partners and the ethical recruitment partners of what is actually happening on the ground.
David, I'll come to the ethical recruitment part in a few minutes. I just wanted to build on what you just described in the context of what really drives you towards employing Nepalese workers. Joseph, having heard what David had to say about some of the inherent characteristics of Nepalese, does it also resonate with you as a business? Or what is it about your business that attracts you towards Nepal? And what do you think are some of the challenges that you also face when dealing with recruiting and hiring Nepalese workers?
Regarding, if you look at the global numbers of Sodexo, 55% of them representing women workforce. Okay, and when David was talking about and challenges bringing women into roles, and Sodexo got a diversity and inclusion as a kind of a policy, and to ensure that and diversifying workforce. And globally, Sodexo represented 55% of the women workforce. That being said, that become a kind of a challenge in Middle East. Middle East and our representation of female workforce is not that much. And if I look at Middle East and generally what we have, exactly like in 15 to 16% of the workforce represent Nepalese. And when I look at the last 22 years of my experience in Middle East, I'm traveling and frequently to Nepal to recruit people. So one of the best things I've found on Nepalese, they're hardworking, they are loyal, and high sense of responsibility and discipline. Okay, so this is all really positive about the Nepali workforce. Nepali government as well made as much as easy on that and part of taking people. So coming to the skill or unskilled composition of the workforce in our systems, and we have about globally, or even that represent Middle East, it's about 10% of the managerial workforce, remaining of them unskilled or semi-skilled or no skill. So what we are trying to do is trying to change the proposition in our workforce composition, and especially the subcontinent, particularly to India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, and Nepal, and where we have influx and the government policies are more flexible, ex-Bangladeshis. So we are trying to bring as much as people, and we have in-house and upskilling program to develop them through and promote them into layers. So that's a kind of a motivation people to stay in the company long term. Recently, and we were doing the long service award ceremony, and believe me, out of in UAE, and half of the people have been crossing 10 years and above. That shows the loyalty of the employee. And people stay with Sodexo not because of just the job. They feel there is a career in this company. I've seen people leaving the company, and when I go for the recruitment drive next time, I could see them and standing there and just saying they come back, they want to come back. Even though at times, and they feel that and something betterment on the other side, but they still feel something missed out in their career, which is being given by Sodexo. So Nepalese workforce has been always, and as I said, and the third highest population in our workforce size. And we would like to work with this, as I said in the beginning, Sodexo was very strong in ethical way of conducting business. And our ethical principles like in loyalty, respect for people, transparency, and business integrity. These are our ethical principles. We'll make sure every business is been conducted in the right way. We had challenges in whatever we could see, and this is what we get in support from the government bodies or any other authorities. And we would like to do more with Nepal, which is again UAE government that really encouraged and hired a lot of Nepalese. That's an opportunity for Sodexo as well.
Great. Thanks, Joseph. That's interesting. So, Tony, I just wanted to move over to you. I mean, from the vantage point that you said, I mean, given the fact that you was coming across nationalities from across each of these countries in South Asia that you probably have had to deal with when you've been courting regional employers here in the Gulf and dealing with them. What do you think are some of the unique attributes you see about the Nepalese vis-a-vis people from other parts of the subcontinent or even elsewhere, because you're also in charge of North Africa? You've probably seen an influx of North Africans also here. What do you see are the key differences, and what are some of the challenges you face with you think are with Nepalese space here?
I'd just like to make a general comment actually on what's just been discussed in respects to retention and recruitment. So we're seeing those more progressive companies who have an appreciation of what skills that they require in their business, want to retain that talent, and they do that by having a structured upskilling program like Sodexo and probably Dulsco as well. So, for instance, a great example there is Americana, who work with very closely, and they have layered qualifications that are not specific to Americana, but allow this kind of transportability and credit, which will allow people to cash them in another institution, or like a university or higher education. And really what you want to do is have a pathway from no skill right through to highly skilled or highly educated. And if you can try to, in some ways, imbue that within the organization, you'll start attracting the type of talent and interest that you expect. I think very early on, I think His Excellency mentioned it on this discussion, the UAE and the GCC are looking for higher levels of skill, and they're prepared to reward that, no question about it. Now, Nepal is competing in a very competitive environment for skills. We've got Bangladesh, we've got Pakistan, we've got India, we've got Philippines, and new entrants from North Africa, as you pointed out, Kenya, Uganda, or other places like this. So what is it that is a differentiator? What is the USP? What do Nepalese bring to the table? And certainly from our perspective, we see them being very effective in the service sector. And I'm pleased to see that the hospitality and tourism area, although it's been fairly badly hit, admittedly, with the COVID-19, still, the bedrock for growth and progression in that is still very, very good. In fact, City and Guilds is putting a big focus around hospitality and certification, not just in formal qualifications, but on-job training that is recognizable and creditworthy. And I think these things that come together will allow people to retain the type of talent and staff that they need to grow their business. So when we look out in, say, the hospitality area, we're looking for things like, for people with attributes like commitment, the communication skills. I think the English proficiency is quite critical in that respects, and computer know-how, enthusiasm, all the things that our colleague from Sodexo mentioned. So I think the Nepalese have a service orientation that I see here, who are working in certain places that I connect with, and they seem to shine in that. Another area which is quite interesting are kind of new areas, like in healthcare, social healthcare, geriatric services, even in respects to security. I mean, one of my largest customers is Dubai Police. And the license to practice for being a security guard is something which you have to go through. Saying that, I see more again. I suppose African, Sudanese, that type of thing. But that's, I think, changing. And I think the English language proficiency seems to be a big, something which really will put Nepal there. And I think actually, if I really think about it, Nepal, their nearest competitor maybe is the Philippines in respects to attributes and attitudes and personality. And I think that is something where Nepal needs to really position itself, you know, this kind of like semi-skilled to high-skilled area. And I think really it starts off with Nepal and what they do with their vocational system to get people to those areas which would be interesting to companies here. I mean, I think about construction. Construction is such a big, it's obviously the biggest market in the GCC, but it's dominated by those neighbours like Bangladesh, India, Pakistan. We worked with the Ministry of Labour fairly recently looking at bringing in more Pakistanis actually into the UAE. So I'm thinking from a marketing point of view and a positioning, the service sector, English proficiency, all those great service attributes that the Nepalese can display. I think these are the things which will make a win for Nepal in this area.
Tony, and then first for Joseph and for David, a follow-up question. I mean, as you were all mentioning during the conversation we had, is it also boils down to the underlying economics of hiring, the cost of hiring. And it's starting to get pretty much cutthroat now in the context of the bottom line that companies see. How do you see the economics of hiring when you hire somebody from Nepal vis-a-vis hiring somebody from the Philippines or India, Bangladesh? Is it cheaper to hire from Nepal? Is it a lot more reasonable? What are you seeing by way of trends? What's driving Sodexo to go to Nepal other than what you just described by way of great attributes that Nepalese have? There's got to be that bottom line discussion as well, right, on economics. So anybody, David, Joseph, Tony, would like to?
If I could comment on this, and when we hire people, and I understand the economy is a matter of the fact. When Sodexo go for hiring, we don't look at that. And when we go to Nepal, and we look for skills. And I remember about 10 years back, and I used to think that in Nepal, you don't get the technical expertise or somebody with an experience of electrical or plumbing or AC kind of a background. So that point in time, I realized that when I went for a trip and started advertising the role, we got a huge number of response to that advertisements. When we see that, most of them got the Gulf experience. Then I realized that not much of really the local training centers are on the particular area to train. And only when you have a lot of education centers or training centers, you can have the trained skills in the market. So you'll have really attraction. But those people have an experience and they come back and they float in the market, and that's what we hire. So just to answer you on the question, and we look for quality and look for experience and those kind of a thing. We don't really look at that and kind of whether it's economy or not. And Sodexo, as I said in the beginning, we strongly believe in diversity and inclusion. So not many companies talk about inclusion, they talk about diversity. When they talk about diversity, they talk about nationality mix and gender mix. But then we also talk about inclusion. The person who is joining, and there is a half-day program called Sodexo DNA. That's a part of the induction program. Make sure we give the Sodexo injection to people to understand where you are. You know, you enjoy your job here. It's not that big job. It's a career, you're going to have it. We have spent, Sodexo invested millions of euros into online training portal. People can take the trainings on the flexible time while they're working. When you're off work, you can take a training and grow yourself. And coming back to the point in Nepal and their hospitality, we are into hospitality. We get a lot of hospitality applicants. And again, when we go for recruitment, we look for pre-experience with an experience and kind of a certification, easy deployment to the job, then go and take them in training. But if that's kind of an availability already there, now with Simon coming on board with the vision and value of training center like this, and if they bring some kind of a training or competencies or skills being given to those people, it'll be easy for them to be hired like a global company like Sodexo.
Yeah, thank you, David. I know maybe Joseph was being a little diplomatic in his response, but I mean, for the same skill set and the same kind of individual that has the same skill set, the same demeanor, India, Bangladesh, Nepal, where would you hire them from?
Well, this is going to sound like you preordained me to say this, but I'm going to say because we've got a really strong position because the UAE is taking a leadership approach of actually reducing the visa costs for citizens of Nepal to be able to work in the UAE. Now that is a massive advantage, A, for the employer, and also for the employee, because it allows an attractiveness to actually recruit. So Nepal is one of a limited number of companies which has an incredibly low visa cost to onboard, which is all part of the makeup of your cost of obviously onboarding staff. What I would also say as well is that the only way we will really shift this, in combination with things like governments are doing, is actually to stop treating it as a commoditized product. Yeah. And you talk of it, you know, and I think you're positioning it very well, is that this is not a commodity. These are humans that have skills, and some people perceive them to be low skilled, you know, medium skilled, high skilled. I think somebody driving, you know, a bus has got a skill, because I see enough people who can't drive a bus that seem to be driving a bus. And that worries me greatly. I do believe fundamentally as well is that of shifting the position of having people better trained will also speed up the whole process of the recruitment and the onboarding. And like Joseph was saying, when we have our people on the ground in multiple countries, and including Nepal, we seek X, and people come for the interviews, and we do, let's be clear, you know, we're all interviewing to a degree and a level to be able to find the right people with the right attributes that will fit into an organization, because fundamentally you're leaving your home country to helicopter yourself into another country where you hope you're going to get on with the people you're working with, as in any job, and you're going to be passionate about your brand and what you're working for. To do that, you've got to really disseminate who's got the skill, who hasn't got the skill, or who can be upskilled. Now, if you're able, to Joseph's point, to take the skill that is needed, that Tony's referring to a level, and I'll use, you know, the cleaning industry and the FM industry. Commoditization happened in many industries, including security, many years ago. And unfortunately, people started hiring arms and legs. That is not what people should be doing. You have an obligation to have the best product, and your product is your people. And if your people have got the right skill, you will deliver the right service to your customer, who will come back time and time again. And to me, that is why, if there's a balance between onshore and offshore skilling, which allows people to develop this. I spoke to a housekeeper who left home 24 years ago, and she came from Sri Lanka, and she told me that she had to pay 80,000 rupees to get a certificate so that she could speak English and she could do housekeeping. That took, she tells me, 4 seconds. So she was out of pocket before she even began by 80,000 rupees. And actually what she's developed is her own skill set over the years. What she's further developed is a skill through her employer. And she's now, I think, a non-commoditized person that she never should have been in the first place. But she's got a skill that is valuable to hotels or to shopping malls, or to, you know, people like Sodexo. But unfortunately, I think we've seen too many times people just been rounded up and utilized for an arm and a leg, and that's not the way it can be.
Thank you, David. So, Simon, you know, having worked with the Expo 2020 and in the capacity of a CEO, and also your other job that you worked on, any comments in the context of this conversation, Nepal workers vis-a-vis others?
Yes, I mean, I think it's, thank you, it's fascinating. I have to tell you, I don't think that we would have been having this debate 5 years ago. I think that there is a significant transformation that is going on within employers. And whilst Sodexo and Dulsco have always been progressive and forward-looking organizations, I think the contribution that David and Joe are now making actually typify the way that the thinking that is going on in a lot of the senior people in positions of responsibility across employers within the Middle East. And therefore, you know, ultimately, they are the employers. So those of us that are involved in the training and in the recruitment pipeline have to listen to them and have to be able to provide them with a better quality worker to meet their needs, but it's got to be done in a way that reduces their costs. It de-risks their employment opportunity, but also they're running businesses. At the end of the line, these businesses, you know, the most important thing is the bottom line. So we, if we can backload more of that training in Nepal, working with people like UKaid, working with people like City and Guilds to create a state-of-the-art facility, training facility that will build on the DNA of the Nepalese people. And I'm not going to repeat what Joe and David said earlier on in terms of the characteristics of the Nepalese workers, but deeply ingrained in their DNA is this loyalty, is this hard-working ethic, is this trustworthiness. If we can couple that with qualifications, then we will be doing something very good for not only for the families of those migrant workers, but also for Nepal as a whole country.
Thank you, Simon. So Stuti, I wanted to ask Stuti, Stuti is the deputy team leader, as you know, of our Skills for Employment program, and is also director in charge of a strategic partnership. So she's in the midst of a lot of these conversations that happen on at the micro level when we are starting to put like-minded folks like you to really embrace some of the thinking that we all collectively have. So Stuti, based on what you just heard and the background of your work before even coming to Skills and the extensive work that you did across other countries in the world, how do you see this conversation that's just emerging in the context of an entry point for a program like ours, but other general observations that you might have before I move on to the conversation about ethical recruitment and others?
Sure, Buljit, thanks. So I want to go back to some of the points that you shared earlier, Buljit, because one of the things that we're trying to do with this event is also to announce that SEEP is open for business. We have some really solid partnerships on migration as well as on the skills side here in Nepal, but we are looking for new and better ideas. So I want to reinforce some of the operating principles that you talked about, Buljit, earlier. The SEEP program's mission, as you shared earlier, is to create livelihood opportunities for Nepalese. This includes jobs and self-employment here in Nepal and in the foreign labor migration market. To get to that goal, we use an innovative challenge fund mechanism, which essentially is a tool that allows us to provide co-funding and technical assistance through an open, competitive selection process. Integral to our operating model and to how we go about job creation with different partners is our interest to address systemic constraints and entry barriers. Barriers that prohibit Nepalese from fair and equitable access to the labor and job market. As we heard about from our panelists, and you shared about this earlier as well, Buljit, that entry barriers in Nepal, as we know, it comes from different quarters, from lack of skills and knowledge to inadequate access to financing. Information gaps is a big one, lack of credible certification, and lack of access to job creating services outside of Kathmandu, among others. So the Challenge Fund is providing a tool for committed institutions to address such barriers as they go about job creation. The Challenge Fund, since 2019, it's giving SEEP and our partners the ability to catalyze increased investments and to improve collaborations among diverse national and international market actors, like those of us present in this virtual room today. Like you said, we have forged 16 partnerships to date, of which 11 are already up and running. And our partners, if you look at their profile, our partners represent Nepali and international firms. We have a range of partners across all of the sectors that are a priority for us, from agriculture, ICT, tourism, manufacturing, and constructions. Our partners represent both large and established organizations as well as emerging small and medium-sized businesses. And each of these firms bring very unique value propositions and industry-aligned skilling models through which they are contributing to new and productive jobs, enterprise growth, as well as, with examples, some of the examples that you provided, Buljit, they're also improving trade linkages. Yeah. So on the screen, you see the partnership model with vision and values, led by a very, very visionary gentleman, Padam Raj Podel. And this is one of the examples of a market-based initiative. Vision and values business model was previously only focused on recruitment and deployment of Nepali workers to destination countries. Today, this partnership is helping to connect and integrate skilling, certification, and financing solutions alongside recruitment service. This partnership is helping, it's taken vision and values outside Kathmandu to closer to where the migrant community lives. and it's helping them promote the values of ethical recruitment more widely. The other key element of our operating model that I want to highlight today is our interest and our ability to facilitate linkages with and to being able to leverage the expertise of international firms like Dulsco, City and Guilds, and Sodexo. Because I think, at the end of the day, our interests, it's one and the same. It's helping Nepali and international organizations in their efforts to build and find reliable quality workforce, to be part of this growing fair labor ethical recruitment movement, a movement that's growing around the world, and to really generate a stronger brand value for all of us, including for Nepali workers. So, I mean, to sum it up, I think for genuinely interested, committed organizations like the UK-based City and Guilds and Vision Values in Nepal, and all of our panelists here today, SEEP can come in as a partner to expand and expedite your efforts, both inside and outside Nepal. And we look forward to staying connected, and I'm happy to speak about our application later.
Great, thank you, Stuti, that's great. Excellent summary. So I wanted to just go back to a conversation that we began. I think, David, you started that discussion related to, the emerging jobs, occupations for Nepalese in terms of where should we be focusing on. But in particular, the interest more is, David, on getting your take on where could we see opportunities for women from Nepal, to seek to graduate into more gainful employment opportunities that would be available. You did delve on a few as you were talking, but I'd like to hear a little bit more from you in terms of where we should be going. I mean, your suggestions, your input.
Look, thank you. And I think we've all been sort of saying the same thing, that there is a certain split between skilled, semi-skilled, and we're calling it unskilled, but they're not unskilled jobs. I mean, take the advent of the food manufacturing industry. Somebody who's accountable and responsible on a food production line that is classed as unskilled, to me, is not unskilled. They have a definitive role to play in that role, and that is a role that they have chosen. Now, they can be upskilled in that role. It doesn't mean they are unskilled to begin with. So I think there are many areas that people across all walks of life can work in, specifically on Nepal, and specifically as we talked about the gender change. It would be amazing to be able to take some specific roles. It's very easy to go to the sort of the normal route. I think hospitality, as Simon said, there's a great deal of affinity with other nationalities in terms of their service ethos. I think from let's talk cleaning, right? Cleaning 10 years ago was to get the job done. Today, in the advent of a post-COVID world, we are talking about a sanitization and a cleaning level that the world has never seen. Whether that's using UV technologies, whether that's using systems and processes, it is no longer an unskilled commoditized job. And therefore, the upskilling needed, as I'm sure Tony will talk to become, whether that's City and Guilds, BICS accredited, whatever it might be, takes the workforce from being unskilled to a skilled operative within the cleaning environment. So from my point of view, I have, and we as a business have a specific needs for semi-skilled, skilled roles right now. We have lots of unskilled roles, as unfortunately the market terms them. And I think we've got to look at how we can recruit, where we recruit, and what we can recruit for what purpose, not the sake of just pulling in an arm and a leg. So if all of a sudden now, Vision and Value said, look, I've got 85 skilled ladies that have the ability that can drive, and we need to upskill them to be able to drive a very large bus within an airport environment, I would put them on a plane tomorrow. And that's genuine. I think we're seeing the needs for much more skilled people to operate at a different level, and especially in the post-pandemic world, than we've ever seen across many industries. There is certainly, I think, a bigger push to have more flexibility in how people work and where they work, because we've seen, as you said, Biljat, that 500,000 people went back to Nepal. The Nepal industry of tourism was decimated because people haven't been able to travel. And so therefore the reverse traction is going to happen, that people are going to want to go back. But to go back and do what? There is no doubt that a lot of people have decided to what we term take off books their employees. So they've gone for less on book and seeking companies to be able to support them for short, medium and long-term assignments. And I think that's where there is a skills gap. In retail, I think there is equally, the flexibility within retail will be enormous as we move forward, as we work with peaks and troughs. And again, in hospitality. But in terms of the more skilled levels that were perhaps owned by being employed by X, Y, and Z, they've now divested those roles and are seeking them from third parties. And that's where I think there's an opportunity.
Great, thank you, Dave. Joseph, what about you in terms of your insights in terms of the future job occupations, especially for women from Nepal? Where do you see?
Baljeet, before coming to that point, and I just earlier comment on the ethical recruitment, I just want to add up something else on that as well. As I mentioned that, and when we do recruit, and we follow a very responsible business conduct, and every suppliers who deal with Sodexo, they have to follow the code of business conduct. So we don't allow any kind of a deviations on these policies, and we are very strict on that. And apart from that, and I can also say that in some of the comment about COVID, and during COVID, a lot of corporates, and they're laying off or terminating people, and I can proudly say in Sodexo UAE, not even a single person being laid off just because of COVID. Okay, and also Sodexo, we created a fund about a part of the employee relief program. We created a fund about 30 million euros. Which has been coming from the variable and fixed income of senior leaders and put together. Globally, it's been distributed. Those have been put aside for unpaid leave or whatever during that period from March till August. So these are the things I can proudly say about in Sodexo. Coming back to the skill, what we really looking for, as you know, there's in Middle East in particularly, we are into hospitality, particularly into food services. It could be production, it could be services, and also we also do a lot of cleaning as well. So like David said, these days it's not like in 2 hands and legs, and like in those days people used to look at as a cleaner. The COVID sanitary crisis and created a lot of challenges, and Sodexo come out with a program of a Rise with Sodexo. This is also to help the employers to make sure they're comfortably, confidently reopening office kind of a solution. So, so we are looking at any positions, and again, we have a growth strategy in Middle East. 30% of the workforce or businesses into facility and maintenance, and remaining on the food services. So you can say that, and the usual flux on the total especially on the food services. We have roughly about 15 to 20% natural attrition. So that happens. So that's also, one is the development, the other side is natural attrition. This is the way we look for people to be hired and replaced. And coming back to specific question, even we are looking for even skill, as long as we can hire trained people. And as I said, even though Sodexo proudly saying that 50% of our workforce is women workforce, and particularly in Middle East, because of nature of the business, we are one of the world leaders in remote site management. So again, that's a kind of a mindset that we think that women workforce and cannot work in certain industry or certain location. This comes as this year focus from the global CEO to make sure we come out with a policy and make sure we change the proposition or percentages of the women workforce as well. So looking at all the sites and the way it goes, and we are happy to hire any level and into Sodexo.
Thanks, thank you. Tony, just based on the vantage point again that you sit at, and the different countries where you're working in, I mean, where are you seeing some of the emerging job occupations evolving for women and moving away from traditional job roles, as David rightfully described, into more of the progressive job roles? Any observations from your side, Tony?
Yeah, I mean, there's an interesting kind of niche areas which perhaps you may know of it, may not even think about, but there seems to be a bit of a skills gap. like a pharmaceutical technician. So not the pharmacist, but the people that help in the pharmacy itself as an assistant. Even dental nursing, which actually is a licensed activity in the United Kingdom, is something which, again, provides interesting opportunity for those countries that see that possibility. Also things like in childcare, nursery assistant, classroom assistant, these areas which are obviously very, I suppose in some ways gender biased, but still offer interesting potential for those people who can demonstrate skill and competency in that area. So it's hospitality and catering and food manufacturing, and maybe even to a certain extent, teleoperations, teleworking. These things are coming in. These are big areas, but there's also these interesting niche areas where may not attract the volumes of people, but certainly very well paid and classed as not just semi-skilled but high skilled. So these are interesting areas which there's some discussions that I've had, not just here in the UAE but in Saudi Arabia as well. That is a requirement. Also in tourism, and I'm not talking about hotels and resorts. Funny enough, as working with the Abu Dhabi Culture Authority, they're looking for tour guides, and people with the language abilities to help and support. So there are things that's coming up here, I think, in the GCC, which will be attractive. Just one note of caution is that people like Saudi Arabia, probably Oman and Bahrain, are really energizing their national skills base for nationals, and that's in some ways migrant labour negative. Certain countries like UAE, Kuwait and Qatar, will always need expatriate migrant. Well, I think it's 85% of the UAE population is migrant. We're expatriates, even I'm a migrant worker. So I think there's some very interesting areas going forward, and it'd be down to Nepal, I guess, to really understand that and focus in on and invest. Maybe part of your challenge fund could support that.
Great. No, that's thank you, Tony. And just to keep this thing moving along, I know I'm conscious of the time here. I just wanted to move on to one final conversation regarding ethical recruitment. So, I mean, you heard what we had to say right from the introduction that I made about what's happening really in Nepal, and the view that we have in the context of the employers picking up a lot of these costs. David, any reflections from you as a company? I know you did talk about how you get closely involved with regards to ethical recruitment. What is it that you can do more as a company to help us really, to help spread the word in Nepal and do a lot more in terms of making sure that the costs are really reasonable? Anything that you'd like to add to that, David?
So I think I'm going to reiterate what I said. It helps because, massive help because the UAE government have supported that through the visa costs, which, is already a door opener for companies and for the employees. The more that we can verbalize and obviously make it understood for people what they should be doing and what they should be paying and what they should be coming for, I think the better. It goes without saying that you need to be clear in your own language. So, when we offer letters, they go in their own language. They don't go in English. They can if there is English understood, but it needs to be understood what you are signing up for. It needs to be understood what the company is paying for, what the company will do when you perform, what the company will do at the end of your service, and have that clearly understood right at the very beginning, so there's no ambiguity. So bringing things down, what does a payslip look like? What does my food look like? Where am I going to be staying? It is no good showing pictures of the beautiful countryside and the beaches in the UAE, believing that you're going to stay in a 5-star Burj Al Arab. So that accountability on ground at the point of recruitment is absolutely critical, and that needs to be shared with the recruitment partner so that you go together. So with vision and values, I can see that it is a harmonious relationship that they will have with their potential people that they are putting forward and training to put forward to people like ourselves, because we don't just want a community roundup in District 2 to bring people in that are going to fail in their jobs, fail when they go overseas, and then the cost that flows for the employer is to sadly send people back home, which is spent visa costs, spent airfares, spent medical costs, and nobody wins. So it's far better to put the effort in at the front end that you then get that longevity that Joseph was talking about, and you're not having to be concerned. And part of what we do as a local company, is we don't believe in just checkbox charity. We're going to actually go on the ground. So when we built the school that the Dulsco employees went over with the Nepalese employees from Dulsco to build, that was a bit different. We didn't just sign a check. We actually put hard muscle into the ground. And that allows people to articulate that through their communities to say, this is an ethical and moral employer that isn't here just for the short-term fix. It's here for the long term.
Thank you, David. Thank you. Yes, Joseph, if you could add to.
If I can compliment
Sure.
what David said is, and I totally agree with David. When an employer hire people, and just want to make sure that we're looking at long term, not really short term. And people like in the company like Sodexo, we take care of all the cost. We look after the visa cost, and we pay for this inbound ticket and every other thing. And on top of it, recruitment agent fees also being paid by Sodexo. So that being said, and what we say, whenever we go for recruitment, we do a kind of a group gathering, make sure we openly announce what we do, what we don't do. What we exactly expecting is a commitment. If at all somebody is coming and joining, unless there is something grave happen and he has to go back, otherwise it's nobody's winning, and it's like a loss to the individual, loss to the employer. So coming back to the point, and I'm sure like Sodexo, many other companies are bearing the cost. And what we expect from the candidate is the mere commitment when we've been decided to, once it's been selected and ready for deployment. So so on top of it, once they come, and obviously Sodexo, and we do put them on many other training, and there are mandatory training. There are, as I said, soft skill training, and also on-job training to go into the different progress in their next career ladder. So, so as long as that has been clear, that has been said from the beginning, before people put on the flight, it's been clearly explained what kind of a company they're going to work for, where they're going to stay. And at times, in a company like us, and we work on remote sites, and they shouldn't be thinking that, and they're going to stay in a 5-star kind of a setup. And those who haven't really traveled, their mindset, they got a perception that then it's going to be completely different. Okay, where in back home, and they decided to walk out on the restaurant tomorrow, that could be done, but it cannot be done and like that. And when you come and committed to work in a company like Sodexo, so that clarity and communication has to be clear in their local language or whatever the language they could understand.
Thank you.
Can I just throw in there very quickly that I think, endorsing what everyone said, that I think the welfare of any employee is critical, and even more so for a new employee. It's probably increased tenfold now with post-pandemic. We saw that with people that were, wanting to go home. Having a solid welfare and healthcare background, I think, within an organisation is absolutely critical. And saying that again at the front end, knowing that you'll be supportive, either through the buddy system or whatever, is critical.
Thank you, David. No, I think this is excellent. I think towards the end of our discussion, we'll just wrap it all up. But I wanted to just move on, and I also wanted to acknowledge as Lisa has joined us, and it's really timely because I'm glad that Lisa has also been listening in on this, because she's really passionate about these issues, and she has really been a supporter of a lot of the work that we've been doing. And it's really my honor and privilege to have Lisa here with us, and I'm glad that the Honorable Ambassador's back also to listen to Lisa. Thank you, Ambassador, you're back. Lisa is the Development Director at the British Embassy in Nepal. And before the merger of DFID into the FCDO, she was the head of DFID country office in Nepal, with the responsibility of running the office and all its programs that we have in Nepal. She has a long and distinguished service with the FCO, DFID, and ODA. Since 2008, Lisa has been working with DFID in a range of senior positions. She was the first ever woman appointed to a substantive role when she became the 55th governor of St. Helena. So for all of us with the back British lineage, we probably know what a great position that is she has enjoyed. So Lisa, without any further delay, I'd like you to please talk a little bit about your perspective, Lisa, and how you see this thing evolving. And thanks for being here.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Baljit, and great to see everybody. I must say this has been such a fascinating discussion for me because, as Baljit said, I do have a passion about migration. You know, I think for myself, but obviously the UK line is that we do believe that migration can be a real force for development. I would say that in many countries that isn't necessarily shared by the government of those countries, and often not actually even its citizens. I would count Nepal in one of those countries. I think Nepal government sees migration more as a failure of development rather than a force for good. But I think bear in mind that just in the latest emergency brought about by COVID and the impact that that had on the economy, it was remittances that actually held up, even though migrants came back from the Gulf, and it was remittances that did not tail off, and therefore the economy did not, although the outlook is not great for poor households, it was remittances that continued to come. I think that says a lot about how migration can be this force for good. I remember some time ago when this debate started, could migration be a force for development? The World Bank did some analysis, and it showed that if obviously industrialized countries spend a lot of money in keeping migrants out because of this mix between economic migration, asylum seeking, for etc. And they calculated that if industrialized countries just brought down the barriers against migration by 4%, that we could solve world poverty, basically, with the savings that were made. So I think that's just such a stark statistic about how the world is not making the best of migration. You know, and we know why, don't we? It's all around the politics. Goods and services and goods moving is all fine. People moving, not quite so. You know, I'm always come back to that statistic about 1,000 Nepalis die. Unfortunately, about 1,000 migrant Nepalis die, unfortunately, every year. And I think that's really quite shocking. It goes back again to the fact, I think the government doesn't value what migrants bring, and they don't, they're not assertive enough in mobilizing them so that they can get the best out of them when they do go. And as someone said, you know, the Philippines are masters at this, and ditto Bangladesh. And I do believe that Nepal's got really a lot of progress to be made to even get near some of those other countries in the way that they treat their migrants. As Stuti said, we are trying to make inroads as the UK into some of this. And it's been great to hear everybody talk about basically ethical recruitment and wanting to really encourage more women and encourage safe migration and get a fair deal. And what Stuti has said is, you know, we are open for business as the UK through the SET programme for more innovative finance products and upskilling of migrants before they go. Particularly pleased to see City and Guilds in in this conversation as well, because Nepal does have to raise itself above others and say that they have something else to offer, and something like City and Guilds and certification will go a long way towards that. So I think just from our point of view, you know, we're really pleased to see this starting and having impact. We're not just a funder, of course. I think there's a number of things that we can do. For example, this policy around Nepali women, we pushed for the legislation to be changed because the evidence showed that the legislation was not stopping Nepali women under a certain age from going. It was actually pushing them into more illegal routes. We do have a program that's around trafficking, but you know, that policy and law was doing more harm than good for women migrants. I think, you know, we can help companies, as has been discussed here, see migrants more as a good investment, you know, and part of their USP from Nepal is they know the Gulf. And as others have said, you know, they are hardworking and committed. So we can, you know, we can support that. I think the bilateral agreements, which we are helping to draw up, is a big way to get the ethical side really sorted out. Migrants need to know where they go if they're in trouble. They need to know what they can expect, and those bilateral agreements are really very important. And you know, great to hear that the ambassador from UAE is on the case for getting that one signed. We would be very happy to have a meeting to see if there was anything more that we could do through our own network as the UK to help that happen. We can help with policies, we can help with legislation. I think that there's something around circular migration in Nepal, because going out, coming back, going out again is all difficult. We know that happens in many, many countries, but other countries have put in place measures in policies that will ease that. I think that the diaspora, once migrants are abroad, there is a role, I think, for government of Nepal to keep in touch with them. Of course, they are the voters when they come home. They are the potential investors when they come home. They will, of course, be keeping in touch with their home country through relatives. But look at what India did with non-resident Indians, and they offered diaspora bonds so that they could invest back in the country as they had money that they could do that with. So I think there's a huge potential, and you know, just to really this vision of migrants is like it's a failure. We need to change the narrative around that. Going out and sending money back to your country is a positive. You know, look at the Gurkhas, for example, and the way that they're held in Nepali esteem. And so we need to shift that sort of the way that migrants are thought of. Easier said than done, I do realise. So I will finish there, but just one further reflection. Balji, you mentioned at the beginning the Global Forum for Migration. And I, for a few years, at the very beginning of that, I was the UK representative to that at the time when Peter Sutherland was the DG of that Global Forum. He died a couple of years ago, and he was previously the DG of WTO, which says a lot, I think, about the transfer between WTO and how the global community was wanting to see migration. What I would say is the discussion we've had today has really moved on from those old days, because that was all, we were almost talking amongst the converted. We knew that migration was a good force for development, but we couldn't just find the levers. So here, what I see is a really good discussion with other governments and employers about how we can push through and do that. I think in Nepal, it's the government that needs to be brought on board a bit more. But I do think we'll get there in the end, simply because it's inevitable. The aging population in the West means that migrants will forever be needed. And so it is the how we get from here to there that we need to pay particular attention to. As you've all said, migrants are not just arms and legs. They are an investment for countries' futures. So I've been really heartened by this conversation, and it's sort of just been so positive to hear it. So thank you for inviting me.
Lisa, thanks very much appreciated. I think you've summed it so well in the context of how we are looking at things and how we need to move forward. And there's so much that, Lisa, you said also resonated with the Honorable Ambassador when he started off this afternoon with some of his remarks. So I think it makes a lot of sense, I mean, to maybe also try to hold a little bit of a discussion, Lisa, if you're available, and the Honorable Ambassador, to just compare some notes in the context of things that they're doing, and also given the proximity that we now have with the larger base of employees in the Middle East, particularly in the UAE, where we have a lot more, I think, not only just as CEEP, even as WSP working here. So I really would like to see if something can come out of this, Lisa. I mean, the Honorable Ambassador is very approachable. And we could try to get a conversation going and see where this leads us in terms of its next steps, and get people of the likes of David and Joseph and Tony and Simon to also, be the emissaries for us as well. I mean, because they do embody the kind of passion we do bring to this table. So that's great. And I'd like to really thank you, Lisa, for this. Very much appreciated. So we are going to try to wrap this up because I'm going to stick to time. I'm just going to have Stuti do a very quick update. Stuti, if you could talk a little bit about our UI launch and, of course, our message on gender equality and social inclusion. So right after that, Stuti, I'll just give you, if it's okay, we're not doing any presentations now, folks. 2 minutes, Stuti, please, because the time is of the essence, if you don't mind. Yeah, please.
Yeah, thanks, Baljeet. Having heard from fellow panelists, I think we can, and speakers, I think we can all agree that there is clear synergy between the efforts and interest of international firms who are present here and the efforts of UKaid, CEEP, and our partners in Nepal. We found we were very lucky to find partners like Vision Values and City and Guilds, who genuinely believe in and champion the skill-based ethical recruitment agenda. We are looking for other ideas and other partnerships too, with national and international institutions both, who can strengthen services on areas like skilling prior to placement and deployment of Nepali workers, ethical low-cost recruitment so that Nepali migrants are not overcharged, internationally recognized certification from credible players like City and Guilds, financing solutions so that migrants are truly able to reap the benefits of their migration experience before they leave as well as after they return to Nepal. And investments from companies to expand their business operations outside Kathmandu in places like Province 2 and Limbuni Province, so that we're all doing what we can to try and level the playing field for aspiring migrants, especially women and people from disadvantaged communities. Gender inclusion and diversity is really important, and I want to thank all of our panelists and speakers, including His Excellency earlier, and Lisa for raising your voice and sharing insights on this important topic. This topic is important for us for a number of reasons, including the fact that right now, foreign labor migrants from Nepal are predominantly men. Women account for less than 10% of the total migrant workforce. Right now, the majority of women migrate as domestic and care workers in the informal sector. So they don't receive the same amount of protection accorded by labor laws, which is available to men. At SEEP, we're trying to change this dynamic. And so we are actively looking for opportunities to bring more women into the formal sector in facility management sector and other sectors that we heard about from our panelists. Because we know that there's an emerging demand and we know that this is possible and we're already starting to see evidence of that. But this is something that will require concerted effort. It will require more commitment and a shift in mindsets. The slide that you see on the screen outlines our application process. I won't go through this in detail, but just to again reiterate that SEEP is open for business. The process you see on the screen might appear daunting the way it appears in this chart, but our process in reality is really simple and straightforward. We have a simple two-step application process. Details are available on our website, which my colleague Hari, our Challenge Fund Manager, can also share in the chat box here. Final message is please do spread the word about SEEP to other like-minded companies that subscribe to this skill-based, ethical job creation agenda. We are looking forward to continuing our conversation and to hear other ideas, and also exploring how best a program like SEEP can link credible Nepali and international firms to further our common interests. So I'll stop here.
Thank you.
We look
Thank you,
forward to
Stuti.
hearing from as many of you as possible.
Thanks, Stuti. Thanks very much. Great. Thank you for summarizing SEEP and the best way to get to us. So we are now reaching towards the end of our program. I just wanted to see if anyone from the panel would like to have any observations at this point before I ask Padam and Basuna to just formally close this session. Anybody from the panel reflecting on what was said, especially from Lisa and others?
Well,
yeah, David.
Yeah, again, sorry. I'm really encouraged to hear that there's multiple levels of support, both government, independent, and obviously the private sector, you know, as we are from the private sector. We've seen similar things like this happen quite well and effectively in India, for instance, with the Gurukuls, and been very encouraged about what they've been able to develop with over there. And certainly we've worked closely with them. So we're keen to drive this forward, and this, you know, this becomes a reality rather than just a discussion. Everything we can do to enhance people's skills and lives, we should be doing, because it's our duty as mankind as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Tony, any reflections from you, Tony, or?
Yeah, it's been a pleasure to hear all the very positive and very inspirational types of thinking. I think there is a broad tent of different types of organizations and how they approach their workforce. Sodexo and Dulsco are obviously right up there with the progressive organizations that see everyone as a human being and worthy of development and support. So I'm really pleased to be part of this, and look forward to the next actions, the next steps.
Great. Thank you, Tony. Simon.
Bajit, no, I'm going to defer to Padam, who I know is going to wind up on behalf of our business.
Sure. Joseph?
It's nice to hear that the panelists and then the commitment from the different parties and on the effort and what we are already taking. And it really encouraging that in the coming days and more support to achieve the common goals.
Thank you, Joseph. So I'm now going to move on to asking our co-sponsor and our partner, who's really setting the tone, as all of us described and Suti expanded upon, Vision Values. Padam, who's the founder of Vision Values. Padam, if you would like to offer your closing remarks, please.
Thank you, Baljit. It is a really great honor. Our Excellency, Said and Lisa from UK Embassy, they are in here. Today it is so great, and it is so encouraged for us since we are working almost like 10 years for the Sodexo, more than 10 years. And how we encouraged from the Lisa Ode as well. It is so great. This is a great opportunity. We believe this is a great opportunity. How SEEP is giving for a Nepali migrant and partnership with UKaid. And we are trying to our best to deploy gender equality and best, obviously there is a upskilling for the employee, is now just our David told from the Delasco how opportunity is for the skilled employee. Like he told if there is 100 of a female employee with a skilled, they want to take it now. Like this is the opportunity in the world coming up, but we are, because of the lack of knowledge and skilled, still we are in situations to send in the lower positions, but in collaboration with SEEP, we hope, like us, Vision and Value and other agencies, we are trying to do it ethical way, the best recruitment drive. Thank you, Baljit and all SEEP team. It is also great, and this is so great opportunity for all of us to learn how old is moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your partnership. Thank you for your vision, and thank you for your fortitude, and also bringing somebody like Simon to come and really set the tone, because that provides instant credibility in terms of where you're going. And we're really proud to be working with you. I'd like to now turn it over for the final set of comments from our migration component team lead, and who has basically been leading a lot of these initiatives on our own, Prasanna. Please, if you could offer your closing remarks, Prasanna. Prasanna, you're on mute, Prasanna.
Good evening, everyone. On behalf of UKaid Skills for Employment program, I'd like to express my gratitude for your valuable participation in today's event that has brought together leadership of diplomatic corps and CEO of prominent private companies of key host countries to underscore importance of migrant skilling and ethical recruitment in Nepal. The event, perhaps the first of its kind, has facilitated dialogues critical to maximizing migration gains for Nepal. I'd like to sincerely thank His Excellency Syed Hamdan Mohammad Al Naqib, United Arab Emirates Ambassador to Nepal, for his time, insightful remarks, as well as commitment for mutually beneficial migration between Nepal-UAE corridor. Also, I'd like to thank Ms. Lisa Honan, Development Director, British Embassy in Nepal, for presence and commitment to migrant skilling and gainful employment opportunities through support from UK government, as well as highlighting on importance of circular migration and on migrants' contribution to overall economic development of Nepal. I'd like to thank Mr. Bazi Bohra, team leader, for leadership of this flagship skilling and employment program, and also the panelists from Delasco, Sodexo, City and Guild, VNB Overseas, and SEEP for their perspective and insights on how companies are promoting diversity and inclusion and placing importance on upskilling workers and their retentions, and also clarifying our notions relating to skilled and unskilled workers. I'd like to highlight that the significance of labor migration for Nepal economy cannot be overstated, as migration for economic reasons will continue to escalate in post-pandemic period. Concerted efforts of various stakeholders, both public and private, with regard to migrants' upskilling and protection is very important. As the economies are gradually opening, the key corridors are gradually opening, it's an opportunity for Nepal to benefit from skilling and upskilling migrants and for more productive and gainful employment. However, migrants are equally, as we know, are vulnerable during pre-deployment and all other stages, as evidenced by the recent COVID crisis. In this regard, the UKaid Skills for Employment program, as articulated through this event, is committed to supporting skilling and responsible recruitment efforts for improved migration outcomes for Nepali migrants and families. Our partnership with national private recruitment companies, as well as prospective stakeholders such as companies in today's panel discussions and beyond borders, are instrumental as they have critical role in migration cycle of foreign labor migrants, ranging from recruitment, skills testing and training, employment, return, including protection of labor and human rights, especially during current health crisis. SEEP activities with recruitment companies are therefore focused on exploration of COVID secure corridors and destination where there are improved measures for migrant safety, well-being, as well as opportunities for market-aligned skilling programs. Furthermore, partnership projects of SEEP and PRA focuses on reducing migration costs through institutionalizing responsible business models, as well as minimizing and transferring costs of skilling to public-private partnerships. Through the launch of this current event, SEEP calls for expanding collaboration with private companies as well as service providers to take the labor migration landscape of Nepal to a next level. Applications are open for challenge fund partnerships, and details are also available on our website. We'll be soon posting the proceedings of today's event, including copies of presentation slides and video records in our SEEP website for your reference. Once again, I'd like to thank you for your valuable time and participation, and I'd like to wish you a great evening. Thank you.
Prasanna, thank you so much, Prasanna. Thank you very much for your closing remarks. And also on the chat box on the right is information available to folks about the program. Also, there were a lot of interesting questions that are in the chat box that we couldn't get to. I want to assure each one of those that have raised those questions that we will respond to them. I will set these questions out to all our fellow panel members. We'll get them out to you all so that you could also help in responding, because some of the questions were directed to specific panel members. So we'll do that. And then at the same time, we are looking forward, Joseph, David, Tony, and Simon, to follow up with you all and others on some very specific focus ideas that we can explore to find ways in which we as a program can also co-partner with you to help you realize your vision, along with the people of Nepal. Thank you very much, everyone, and thanks for being with us. And a special thanks to the Honorable Ambassador and for Lisa. Thank you and have a good evening, everyone. Thank you.